So I would like to kind of formally invite, say good morning and welcome to this amazing webinar, Nurturing and Transforming Father-Baby Relationships from Day One. And I am so super excited to have both Nicolas, and I have to, and I hope I say the surname right, Kasovac, who's calling in all the way from the US. And I know it's a bit of a very, very early in the morning for you, Nick. So thank you so much for taking the time to come here today and share your experiences of working with fathers and newborn babies. And we have Kieran Anders, who I have had the pleasure of meeting several times. And Kieran is working with Dad Matters, as you can see on his screen as well. So I'm going to completely kick off and we'll get started because we're very lucky to have these people with us. And I know that they are also keen to get going and tell us more about their work. So I just want to introduce you to Nick, who today will explore how the newborn behavioral observation, so the MBO, can be used intentionally to engage and support fathers during pregnancy and the early postnatal period. And this is informed by findings from the State of Men UK 2025 report, which highlights men's loneliness and emotional isolation. The session will emphasize fathers' need for buffering, filtering, and confidence building during this highly vulnerable time. Using the AMOR framework, attendees will learn how observation-based practice supports paternal confidence, competence, and reflective capacity before formal learning begins. Practical examples from Nicolas' extensive work with fathers will illustrate how early engagement strengthens relational health across disciplines and settings. And this talk will leave you inspired, equipped, and eager to make a real and lasting difference for the fathers you meet in your work, whatever the setting. So, a huge warm welcome to you, Nick, and over to you. And I'm going to find you here so I can just spotlight. There we are. Welcome, Nick.
Thank you, Inga. Hello, everyone. And if you'll give me just a moment here.
You take your time.
All right. Are you able to see my PowerPoint?
I can't.
All
No.
right. Oh, that's why I need to share.
Okay.
I'm
We can
I'm
see
getting
it.
there.
We can see it now, yes.
All right, wonderful. So, just to start off, I want to say that I feel like I have a lot of information, and I always have so much to say about fathers working with infants and toddlers. So, I'm going to probably move fairly quickly through my presentation. I definitely want to leave some time after my talk to allow for questions and discussion. I won't be reading all of the details on the slides. Some of the data that I'm sharing with you from the reports, there will be a reference page at the end. So I strongly encourage you to download those reports and really look through them. They are quite amazing and very, very broad as well as deep in the amount and the quality of um, information that they gathered. So just to begin with, I want to acknowledge that I'm joining you from the ancestral lands of the Puyallup tribe of Indians, part of the Coast Salish peoples in the Pacific Northwest of the United States. That's in Washington State. I also want to acknowledge that many of you are listening from across the UK and other parts of the world, each gathering from lands with long living indigenous histories. As someone who speaks often about relational environments and developmental containers, I try to remember that land is our oldest container, holding memory, culture, and continuity long before any of us arrived. I offer this acknowledgement with humility and gratitude. I also want to just acknowledge that with a lot of the progression and changes that we have around identity and inclusion, the terminology that I'll be using is typically fathers or dads or paternal, but that's not meant to exclude anyone. It's meant to be inclusive of however someone self-identifies. So a little background about myself. I've worked in pediatrics for around 30 years in a number of different capacities. Um, I worked as a home visitor for about 10 years. A couple of those years I worked as home visitor for NICU grads after they went home from the hospital. I then studied infant mental health, became endorsed as an infant family specialist. During that time, I developed the DAD projects, which was focusing on the relationship between dads and infants. And then most recently, I returned to graduate school, became a pediatric occupational therapist. So my background did start early in the early field work in relational systems and developing object permanence. All right, if you'll just give me a moment here. So before we look at any data, I want to anchor us in a simple developmental truth. Men do not become fathers in a vacuum. They arrive carrying histories, relational histories, cultural histories, experiences of attachment, stress, belonging, exclusion, confidence, and doubt. Fatherhood is not the beginning of development. It's a reorganization of an already existing system. And the reports I'm about to reference help us see that system more clearly. I want to express appreciation for the depth and rigor of the researchers whose work I'll be drawing from, particularly the reports, The State of Men in UK, The State of Fathers in the World, The State of American Men, and related population level analyses. These reports synthesize large-scale data across mental health, caregiving, identity, social norms, and structural conditions affecting men and fathers. They give us something incredibly valuable, a developmental landscape, not anecdotes, not assumptions, a landscape. And when we understand that landscape, we can design our relational work with fathers more intentionally. These reports don't just give us numbers, they help us to see the ecology men are living inside before they ever hold a baby. So, from the State of the World's Fathers, Unlocking the Power of Men's Care, uh, what they basically found out was that men are growing up inside a world where caregiving is already gender coded. This is a cultural water for many men and others that they've never noticed. So some of the key findings are many men and women still agree that caregiving is primarily a mother's role. But what they also found was that girls do around 40% more unpaid work than boys in childhood. So these norms start very early. On top of that, the social policies often reinforce maternal default caregiving. So by adulthood, caregiving expectations are already neurologically and culturally rehearsed. So when a man learns he's becoming a father, he's not starting fresh. He's negotiating a legacy. So just some other details. About 48% of the countries offer paid paternity leave. Where the leave does exist, it's often only days, not weeks. And many fathers take little or no leave even when it's available. So the policy environments often tell men be emotionally present but structurally absent. We ask men to attach to their babies without any developmental scaffolding. So as a synthesis, men become fathers in the middle of their own development. When they discover they're becoming fathers, they often are carrying inherited gender norms, navigating economic pressure, lacking caregiving rehearsal, entering a new attachment role without developmental preparation. This is the developmental landscape many men are already in, which is why country-specific findings matter. So what does it look like in the UK and the US today? So the father-infant relationship begins inside a pre-existing ecology. Babies aren't the only ones born into context, fathers are too. The transition to fatherhood is not a beginning, it's a reorganization. And fatherhood is developmental container and a relational ecology. And I hope by the end of my talk that that will make much more sense.
I must be crazy now. Maybe I drink too much. That's when I think of you.
Before I finish the video, just want you to read this caption or see this caption, which says, when tough little boys grow up to be dads, they turn into big babies again. I just want that to sink in. See, how does that hit you?
I long to feel your touch, to whisper in your ear words that I always thought words only you would hear. If only you were mine. I wish I could go back to the very first day I saw you. Should have met my.
So these next few slides are from Equimundo's State of UK Men 2025 report, authored by Dr. Chloe Lewis and done in partnership with Beyond Equality. The references, as I mentioned, will be cited at the end of the PowerPoint. So some of their findings were 63% of UK men believe no one cares about men's well-being. 63%. That's almost 2/3 believes that no one cares about men and their well-being. 1 in 4 men believe no one will ever fall in love with them. Many report declining purpose and meaning in their modern life. And a growing number of men enter adulthood already carrying relational doubt. Some more findings was being a man strongly is tied to beliefs of strength, providing for themselves and others, and emotional restraint. There's also a persistent man box norms that is still widely endorsed. And I'll say something about man box in just a minute. Uh, Men are also navigating the identity shifts without any clear alternatives. Many men are also renegotiating identity without that developmental scaffolding. So the man box is a term that comes from a study that Equimundo did called the Man Box Study that was conducted with ACTS, and it's a 2017 research project surveying young men ages 18 to 30 in the US, the UK, and Mexico regarding rigid traditional masculine norms. It found that most men feel pressured to be self-sufficient, tough, and aggressive, leading to higher rates of depression, suicide, and violence. So additional findings, that declining sense of meaning and direction among men. There's an economic instability that's linked to identity strain. The mental health struggles are under-recognized. And for many men, fatherhood may be one of the first culturally sanctioned sources of meaning. Also, there's what they found, relational hunger is high. So high loneliness and social isolation. Digital spaces are shaping identity narratives. Men are reporting fewer emotionally safe spaces. Many men are relationally undernourished before their baby is even born. And think back to the video and that caption that I pointed out for you, that when men have babies, that they become big babies again. So shifting to the United States, emotional landscape of American men found in this report that economic anxiety is the dominant concern. So again, we're back to that idea of provision. Provider identity is still central. 86% endorse it. Financial instability strongly tied to loss of purpose. Masculinity is still economically wired. These next few slides are from the Equimundo's State of Men in America 2025 report, which is co-authored by Doctors Tavishi Gupta, Gary Barker, and Dr. Chloe Lewis. References will be cited at the end of the PowerPoint, as I mentioned. So what they found is that masculinity is narrowing, not expanding. There's restrictive masculinity beliefs increasing since 2017. Many men report not feeling masculine enough, that man box norms linked to poor mental health. Men have identity pressure without any emotional outlets. And I'm not sure what it's like in the UK. I think it's similar, but I know in the United States that have uh, we have very little behavioral health, mental health support that's available for a number of different reasons. So loneliness is a public health issue. What they also identified was that the majority say no one cares about men's well-being, similar to the UK men. High loneliness and disconnection. Isolation is strongly linked to suicidality. And I want to emphasize loneliness is not peripheral, it's developmental. And I think that's important to keep in mind as I go forward through the presentation. So what I'd like to propose is that fatherhood is a protective factor. So fathers report a higher sense of purpose than non-fathers. Caregiving is linked with meaning and identity coherence. And fatherhood doesn't just change babies, it reorganizes men. So across the contexts, the pattern's clear. There's rising loneliness, fragile purpose, economic identity pressures, narrow masculinity scripts, limited relational spaces for men. So many men are beginning fatherhood already carrying significant psychosocial load. And here's just an example of what that might look like.
One of the things I really love about getting a divorce is finding out how many of my male friends had no idea I was even married. I love that, because nothing feels better than getting a text from fellas you see every weekend that says, "Dang, bro, didn't know you had a wife." "Really, Travis? Because you were one of my groomsmen." "Oh, I thought that was a bar mitzvah." "Yeah, I'm not Jewish or 13 years old. Do you know anything about me?" "My boxers gave me more support than this briefing." And we wonder why there's a male loneliness epidemic and dudes are dropping like calls when we can't even pick up the phone. And it's not our fault. Our dads never asked how we are, so we don't know how we are. All because our dads thought that sadness might mean you like men, we refresh our banking app all day and doom scroll Instagram models. We can't think about our feelings, so we distract ourselves with thoughts. And some of these guys have the dumbest suggestions, bro. They'll be like, "You'll be all right, dude. Just lay pipe on a few chicks and you'll forget all about Katie." "Yeah, well, that's not her name. So thanks. Way to trivialize someone I was in a relationship with since back before I had my last passport photo. That doesn't make me feel worse." It just sucks. Because the one friend who used to not make me feel so alone is the one I'm getting divorced from. That's why I used to hang out with her and not you. Good morning.
I'm just going to pause for a moment and let that sink in. So, when a man becomes a father, he's often carrying identity pressure, searching for meaning, relationally under-resourced, entering caregiving without preparation. And this is the developmental ecology that the baby arrives into as well. So consider this. Fathers don't necessarily need engagement because fatherhood is the developmental reorganization inside an already unstable ecology. So you're basically laying the groundwork for fatherhood as a relational stabilization event. So how many of us were taught to see the parallel process in this way? And many of us were trained using some version of this model. But I'd like to propose something else. I don't think this parallel process model is wrong. I think it's just incomplete. What if the development doesn't move in straight lines? We often talk about development as if it moves in these straight lines, milestone to milestone, domain to domain. But in reality, development is nested, it's recursive, and it's relational. Motor development affects emotional regulation. Emotional regulation affects attention. Attention affects relational engagement. And all of it reorganizes continuously. So what if it's more like this? Influence might be less like passing something down, more like shaping something together. Development isn't linear, it's dynamic, it's nested, it's constantly reorganizing. And if we think of fatherhood this way, it's less like stepping onto a straight road and more like shaping clay on a wheel that's already in motion. Form emerges within relationship. Shape arises through contact. Process is more important than transmission. Instead of the linear parallel process, consider the developmental container that you are helping to shape, which is providing the experience that builds the confidence for the father, thereby encouraging him to shape another developmental container for his baby, which is ultimately ends up helping the baby to shape the baby's developmental container with their father.
So did we have a rough night last night? Just wondering if somebody has anything they want to say for themselves.
I just couldn't get it together. I just needed to be held all night, so about every hour or so I'd wake up and just kind of scream.
You just screamed?
Yeah, until somebody came in and
Patted your tushy?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, picked me up.
What about, did you need a binky too?
Mm-hmm. But most of the time I didn't really want to take it.
Yeah. You just wanted to.
I just wanted to scream.
For no good reason.
Yeah.
Sounds like somebody else I know.
So what I want to point out is that fathers don't enter parenthood uninformed. They most typically enter overwhelmed because they're navigating an avalanche of advice from all over the place, family, friends, strangers, the internet. And they're faced with, what do I do? They also have conflicting authority voices. Who do I believe? Decisions without developmental scaffolding. How do I decide? Across the UK and the US, men report rising loneliness, identity pressure, and little guidance for caregiving roles. So the problem is not absence of information, it's absence of integration. So if fathers are surrounded by voices, expectations, and urgency, the issue isn't that they lack advice, it's that they lack a way to regulate and metabolize it. Filtering input, organizing it, deciding what to hold and what to let go, that's not a personality trait, that's a developmental function. And that's where, as providers, we can help with that. So buffering as a developmental function. As I just mentioned, as men enter fatherhood, they are just overloaded and overwhelmed with information, completely saturated. So they're navigating that high volume of input with low coherence and limited relational scaffolding. So the bottom line is the developmental task is not acquisition, it's filtration. And again, that's where providers can be incredibly helpful. And when we look at fathers through a developmental lens, buffering isn't a skill, it's a capacity. So strengthen the capacity that's already trying to organize itself. This brings me to why I think the MBO works so well with fathers. And for those of you that have been trained in the NBO and that know about it, I'm sure a lot of this is repetitive and you already know this, but just to reinforce it, the NBO is a pressure reducing intervention. It uh, it emphasizes observation over instruction. So lowering the fear of doing it wrong or harming the baby is going to be really important for these fathers as they enter this new role. How shared attention to the baby reduces that self-consciousness and performance anxiety, and the observation lowers performance pressure. Like the father doesn't feel like he needs to do it perfectly. And then the baby becomes the shared focus, and all of that helps the anxiety to drop. Which then brings us to belonging, which is the regulatory experience. So belonging is not reassurance, it is a co-regulation. And again, when anxiety drops, capacity rises. As confidence grows through participation, confidence grows through participation, not through instruction. And if you think about that for a moment, what that actually means, can you reflect back on a time when maybe you were trying to instruct someone without realizing it, and it was just not setting in. They just were not getting it. So if we can shift that and focus more on the participation and supporting the participation, that's what's going to build the confidence. And as the confidence builds, that's what's going to help them to learn and retain that. So fathers learn themselves by watching their babies respond to them, that participation. And this is a huge feature of the MBO, that the baby is the port of entry. So the baby's behavior is a window into the system. It's observation over instruction, strength-based, relationship-centered. The MBO doesn't start with fixing parents. It starts with meeting the baby. So Amor isn't just about babies. It's a dynamic regulatory process across the entire system.
Heyrir í mér? Góðan dag. Já, ég
Sorry.
heyrir í mér. Já, sæl, ég hringi frá heilsugæslustöðinni í Árbæ.
Sorry, can we just ask everybody to mute?
Thank you. I wasn't sure if I was doing something wrong. Okay. So using the Amor across 4 domains. So there's prenatal, postnatal, parent, practitioner, and I believe there's the newest one, the sibling Amor. So the newborn is not passive. The newborn is actively working to regulate. Fathers are also reorganizing. Their Amor tasks mirror the baby's, just at a different scale. The practitioner regulates first. That regulation scaffolds for the parent, for the father, and the parent scaffolds for the baby. That's belonging. So fathers often arrive feeling evaluated, which is why many fathers avoid asking questions or practicing skills. Also, as I mentioned before, that fear of failure, incompetence, or afraid of hurting the baby, all are a barrier to engagement. Using the MBO to establish felt safety and competence first creates the conditions for transitions into confidence. That MBO shifts the frame from evaluation to curiosity. And this isn't theoretical. Across multiple countries, the MBO is associated with increased confidence, engagement, and responsiveness, including increased father involvement. So when fathers feel included, they stay longer, they look more carefully, they ask more. That shift isn't motivational, it's regulatory. And when regulation stabilizes, confidence emerges. And if confidence is the precondition for learning, then what fathers are undergoing is not training, it's becoming. When confidence grows, something reorganizes. Confidence is not a personality trait, it's a developmental outcome. So confidence actually forms through that regulation, not instruction, through cycles of noticing, misreading, repairing, trying again. Many thanks to Dr. Ed Tronick and Dr. Claudia Gold. Not that I was planning to, but they just published a book, I believe, on this very topic. So it's really important. Each cycle strengthens that father's amour, and each cycle helps to reorganize his identity. Oops, sorry.
What is love? Does anybody really know what is love? Can you please tell me? I know love is more than just a four-letter word. Love is that feeling inside that sometimes is very difficult to describe. You always feel it and it's always there. And sometimes it just comes at you out of nowhere. What is love? Does anybody really know what is love?
So much of early infant work focuses on supporting the baby, and rightly so. But the conditions we create around fathers matter just as much. When fathers feel buffered, they can stay present. When they experience belonging, confidence begins to stabilize. And when that happens, something important unfolds. Not just a regulated baby, but a father who is becoming. I'd love to hear what resonates with you. Thank you.
Thank you so, so much, Nick. That talk was very powerful, informative, insightful, and also very emotional. So thank you so much for that. I can't see any questions in the chat. Does anybody have any questions? You can actually put your hand up and let us know. So there are some comments. Thank you, really informative. Had so many aha moments. I cried. And I think it really was very powerful, Nick. And it's so important that we actually all have this knowledge. And so thank you so much for sharing that with us. I'm kind of capturing a lot of information from those reports. That is just so that's so valuable and important as well. Right, we have a couple of questions. So, Camille, feel free to unmute yourself and ask Nick your question.
Hello, that was so powerful. I think women and men could learn so much from that. The way you described it so clearly as well, I think it was beautiful. I want to ask about the dads that you can't reach so easily, that may not want to prepare for things coming ahead with birth or with children in general, or maybe shut down and have maybe closed off some emotions and things, and think that they can do it when it's there in front of them. And maybe, yeah, how would you broach those fathers?
It's difficult to have a one answer, or one line answer to that because, as you know, every situation is going to be a little different. I think there's some generalities that can be helpful. One is to recognize that very often, if they are kind of standoffish, if they're not engaging, it could be for any of those reasons that I gave in the beginning. Just the psychosocial, relational doubt that they're coming in with. That could be a big part of it. Another part of it, I think, is really important that we don't pay enough attention to is that, in general, women, especially in this space, tend to communicate differently than men. Whereas women tend to be en face, facing each other and maybe even leaning in to each other. And it becomes this very personal, very warm kind of exchange. For many men, that ends up being either threatening or way too intimate. And if you observe men when they're talking, oftentimes they will talk shoulder to shoulder, side to side, turning their head to face each other. So they're facing forward while they're talking sideways, or they're doing something that's outside of both of them, something external that they're focused on, and they're essentially speaking to each other through that outside focus. That could be working on a car engine or attending a sporting event. So what I like to say is that use the baby as that outside focus and talk to him through the baby. Um, Now, as far as those dads that maybe during prenatal time, um, again, it kind of depends. I'm not really sure that there's, um, I guess, just making sure that they are invited, that they're welcomed into the space, that it's not that it's presented more as an expectation. For example, mom is going for an ultrasound appointment. And instead of saying or coaching mom or the doctor to say, do you want to go to the ultrasound appointment? Saying, her ultrasound appointment is on this day at this time. Why don't you go with her? Or just making it more of a statement rather than an inquiry. And I think I'm going to pause there. Hopefully that was enough of an answer.
Thank you. That makes sense. I feel like when you walk with each other, sometimes you might chat more, and I can really see that. Sometimes then we lean in more to get more from someone, and that may back them off even more. So I can really relate to that on a lot of levels. So I think that's
a great example.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nick, there's also a question from Nina.
All right.
Hi, Nick. Thank you so much for that presentation. So much resonated with me. One thing that springs to my mind is I live, work, and raise my own children in an area of the UK with really high socioeconomic, undeserved disadvantage. And one thing that resonates with me personally and professionally is probably the notion of a lot of myself and a lot of practitioners I work alongside have grown up with absent fathers, and there potentially is that unconscious bias from a practitioner when we're working in that area. And so how do we support the local support landscape to challenge some of that unconscious bias that you may or may not hold as a practitioner when working with fathers because of your own personal experiences?
Yeah, I come across that every so often. I think there's a couple things I'd like to say about that. One is, as providers, at least in the United States, this seems to come up a lot, where we want to identify whether or not the father had a father figure growing up, and somehow that assigns his abilities or his skills or his willingness, whether or not he had this father figure. when I think it's just arbitrary because there are men who did not have a father growing up, and they're amazing fathers. Then there are some men who did have a father growing up, and they're not amazing fathers. So it really depends on the individual, and just to recognize that just because they didn't have a father doesn't mean that they're not going to do a good job. And I actually learned that from an 18-year-old. I was meeting a teenage girl. She was 17, just had a baby. Her boyfriend was in the hospital room with her, and I was explaining our program for them. And the boyfriend, who was not the baby's father, it was the boyfriend, and he had said they're going to start a family, and he was going to raise the baby as his own. But he said, "Oh, I know what to do with the babies." And I thought he was being kind of cocky and arrogant, and I was like, "Oh, really? Where exactly did you learn to take care of babies?" And he said, "I was raised by a single mother, and I was the oldest of four kids, and I had to take care of my siblings because my mom was working most of the time, and I made dinner, and I potty trained my brother." And he just went and like named all of these parenting tasks, and I was like, "Okay, you know what? He just schooled me." So we can't always assume that they don't know what they're doing, or um, assigning what type of person they are. Um, yeah, hopefully, Nina, that was enough of an explanation.
Thank you, Nick. We have another question from Jenny.
Hi, Nick. Firstly, wanted to say thank you so much. On a personal level, my daughter is about to have, and son-in-law, about to have the first baby in August. So didn't expect to feel quite so tearful within your talk. So that was lovely. Thank you so much for that. On a professional level, my background is sick children nursing, and I've been a health visitor in the UK for 25 years. So this is a very specific question that someone asked me recently that I've never been asked before, and it's about specific to dads. So they said they've been advised that when in the early postnatal period and beyond, if they wanted, that baby should sleep on dad's side of the bed and the next to me crib, and it's a breastfeeding mom, and would be handing the baby to mom, and this would support with bonding. I just wondered about your thoughts on that. And I know it's really specific, but I've never been asked that before. So I said, I'm always very honest and said, well, I've never been asked. But I knew I was coming on this course, so I could ask somebody, which is you, Nick. Thank you.
Yeah, I actually heard that recently myself.
Mhm.
For me personally and professionally, quite frankly, I don't buy it. I don't buy it.
Yeah.
There's so many other ways for dads to bond with baby, and every family situation is different. So, in the best of all possible worlds, dad's going to get up in the middle of the night when baby is hungry. Dad brings baby to mom. Mom breastfeeds. Then dad burps the baby, changes them if they need it, puts the baby back to bed. But I've also met families where that just wasn't possible. One in particular, a dad worked a very, very stressful job. He needed 8 hours of sleep each night to be functional. So what he and his wife worked out was that Monday through Thursday, he slept in the guest room, and
Yeah.
mom and the baby slept in their room. And then on the weekends, he did sleep with mom and baby and would get up and do all of those things. But that's what worked for them in their situation. And I think too, in general, parenting, we seem to try to reduce everything to what is most convenient for the parent. And one of the kind of filtering questions that I share with dads is whenever they're faced with a decision and they're not sure which way to go, I say, you can ask yourself, is this best for my baby or is it convenient for me? And sometimes that helps them to kind of weigh out the pros and cons. And granted, there may be times when they need to choose what's convenient, but understanding that there could be consequences or outcomes that they're going to need to address at a later time. And I think that phrase can also be helpful for providers. So is this decision that I'm doing as a provider best for this father, or is it convenient to me as a provider?
Yeah. I have to say, someone's just put Esme has just put a a comment in as well, which supports what you're talking about. And that's the way I would perceive it, that, yeah, more effective with breastfeeding to be on the side of the child, of mom at that point. So thank you for your response. That's really helpful. I can go back to the family.
You're
Yeah,
welcome.
and speak with them. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you,
Take
Jenny.
care. Bye. Bye.
Thank you for all your questions. Nina, you still got your hand up. Have you got
Yeah, just one more question. I'm so sorry, Nick. I'm just it's an area that I'm really passionate about, fatherhood inclusivity. And I know you briefly touched on incomplete policy landscape that in my opinion, due to capitalism and neoliberal social policy, perpetuate a lot of the rhetoric and narratives that have been highlighted in research. So male loneliness, the expectation that provider of being a provider, all of these are perpetuated by neoliberalism. So across Western cultures and Western governments, the UK and the US alike, where our social policy is very much governed by neoliberalism, what actionable steps that can be impactful would you like governments and healthcare providers to take to improve fatherhood inclusivity?
How much time do you have?
I know, I know.
Really, I guess how I would respond is number one to say I think things shift in society before it's represented in policy or government or even in media. For example, stay-at-home dads. When the US had the economic crash in the 2008, uh, there was a huge shift to a lot of dads becoming stay-at-home dads and a lot of moms going back to work. But it wasn't really represented in media and in policy. Now, policy and government in general, I have rather strong feelings about this because we have how many decades of research on the importance of birth to three, the first 1,000 days, um, on and on and on, and still doing more and more research. And yet, what impact has that really had? How many times have people gone and done presentations at Parliament or Washington, D.C., or done, drives and like the baby walks and all of that to try to raise awareness? They still are not making the change. So I think it needs to be grassroots. It needs to come from people, from parents, and basically the townspeople running in with pitchforks and torches, demanding change. If I were to be honest.
So we need a revolution then.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you. I think we've got time for at least one more question. There's some really lovely comments, Nick, in the chat, and I will share those with you. There is a question from Harriet. I wonder if you notice difference with same-sex dads, or if you have anything to share on this.
I'm wondering if she could be a little more specific.
Harriet, would you mind coming on asking the question?
I guess I was thinking, I think we were talking about it in quite a heteronormative way of kind of the mother and the father. And I'm wondering whether if you had, for example, two fathers, or I know I've just seen Amy also asked a question, but maybe that's making the question too big, about transgender men who might have given birth, or, how the different gender and sexuality identities might tie into this, maybe. Did I clarify?
Yeah.
Did I make that more complex?
No, actually, that's helpful. And the way I would answer is to say it boils back down to our language and how we use language and what different words represent. So how I might change the terminology that I use, especially in those situations, is I might talk about a maternal parenting style versus a paternal parenting style, which is basically genderless. Um, so that's how I would kind of shift and talk about it. Sometimes people talk about the birth parent versus the non-birth parent. although there's some controversy about that, that it's somehow by using the term non-birth parent that implies that they are secondary or less important. So, but again, I think it just boils down to my earlier slide about how, language is not caught up with where we are. But I think to go back to your question, there does seem to be differences between even same-sex couples of one having a more maternal style, another having a more paternal style.
Thank you,
Thank
Nick.
you.
We've got time for one more questions, and then I'm going to introduce you to our next speaker. Tina, you got your hand up.
It's just a comment because I live in Denmark where we have paid paternal leave and maternal leave for a year, and now we have 11. The last 11 weeks of the leave has to be by the father. So we have seen some changes in the way fathers attach to their babies after that. So I hope somebody's researching because it's really been moving to see how many dads are included in their children's life in another level because they are at home with them at that much time.
Yes. So if I may comment, I did hear about or read about, I believe it was Sweden that did a study about fathers and paternal leave. And what they found was even though the government was offering it, that a very large percentage of men were still not taking it.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently the reason was like the optics, what that looks like, and how does it affect their employment. And they didn't want to lose standing at their job. That there still were these outside influences that were still affecting whether or not they stayed home, even though they had that government policy, they were able to do that. The other thing I want to share, just this is as a personal anecdote, when I do my dads and babies group called the Dad Projects, a lot of times after the 6 weeks, dads will say, I'm supposed to be going back to work in a couple of weeks and I don't want to. I want to stay home with my baby. And this one dad in one of the groups said, well, I went to my employer and I told them that I was only coming back part-time so that I could stay home more with my baby. And another dad said, wow, that's really great that your employer lets you do that. And the first dad said, oh, I didn't ask them. I told them.
Yeah.
Which I think we could use more of that too.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I am aware that there is just one more question in the chat. Somebody's saying, I can't put my hand up. Annabella, would you like to just unmute and ask the last question?
Inga, there's also, if I may interrupt, there was a comment from Chloe Lewis in the chat. If you could just highlight that, because that's Dr. Lewis who did the State of the Men UK report that I cited here. So just want to say hello to Dr. Lewis and thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you. Have we got Annabella? No? Okay. Anything, do pop it in the chat. Thank you so much again, Nick. That has so much food for thought. Definitely, I have learned so much.
Sorry to interrupt. I was having some technical difficulties, like I don't know why I couldn't switch on my audio.
Okay.
Okay. I would like to have one question and just one remark. I am in the UK, but I'm original Mediterranean from Portugal, so I'm very surprised because, of course, I come from a very different culture, and in Europe we have so many different cultures where the parents are very involved. So, like, we cannot just put a blank over everyone. I work as a maternity nanny. In my experience, I've worked with parents from all different cultures, and they're all getting involved. But the question I would like to ask Nick is this. I once had someone that made a comment, someone who teaches sailing, and he said to me, when I teach sailing, I have learned through observing that men, they like to put their hands on and do it, and women, they like to observe first and then do it. So we would always let men get on first because women like to observe first. Is this something that you have also noticed with parents that and I know that there are people this now we have people identifying different with different sexualities, so it will be a range, but is this something that you have noticed in your experience with parents
As
or with
far as
fathers out there?
how they learn differently,
How they like to learn, how they like to get their experience, and going from the point they have no experience, because when the fathers or when the men already have experience, of course they are already more confident. But when it's like their first child, they don't have experience. Have you noticed this? And I would just like to add as well to Nick, because I know that you are American. My niece just had a baby, and the father is taking 4 weeks from birth of paternity leave. So I know that like American people, you have like 1 week of holiday a year, don't you?
yes,
So
yes.
4 weeks of paternity leave to start with, I imagine for you, it's like, wow, how is this possible?
Yes, that's fantastic, and hopefully it will just keep increasing. So to answer your question, uh, there's a couple ways to think about it. One is what I have found most helpful is if I can learn more about that individual father and what are his interests, and then try to explain something about babies or child development that relates to their interest, it's easier for them to understand it. So, for example, if they're an engineer, I might be talking more systems. If they are a mechanic, just as one example, sometimes I'll say to dads, okay, well, when you have a car, you know you're supposed to change the oil every 3 to 5,000 miles, right? So you would anticipate that. And what happens if you don't change the oil? You have the little light that comes on the dashboard. Okay, so that's your cue that you need to change the oil. And then if you don't pay attention to that cue, then all of a sudden your car starts knocking, it starts making that noise. And then that's another cue. And then if you don't pay attention to that, then it could crack the gasket in your engine, and then you have to have it replaced. I said, well, it's the same with the baby, that they have these cues that tell you what they need, but if you can anticipate what their needs are before they give you the cues, your baby's going to run much more smoothly, just like your car would. So, to use an analogy that they understand, the follow up to that, the part two that I would emphasize, and I think this is really important across the board, is we need to explain to fathers why something is important. Instead of just saying, well, you need to do this, or the baby needs this, tell them why. And when they understand that why, that's when they're able to really retain it and apply it to different situations or to broader contexts.
Thank you.
Hopefully that made sense.
That's really, really helpful. Thank you so much, Nick. Right, I am now we're going to introduce Kieran Anders from Dad Matters, and I'm sure many of you would have met Kieran before. So his talk is how the MBO is game changer for fathers. So the next session introduces Dad Matters, a Homestart powered initiative dedicated to improving the early relationships between babies and their fathers. Drawing on the newborn behavior observations, the NBO framework developed by Newton, we explore how understanding infant cues, behaviors, and capabilities helps dads build confidence and connection from the very start. Participants will learn how our peer support model engages fathers during pregnancy and early parenthood, offering practical, strengths-based guidance that empowers dads to form secure, responsive bonds with their babies. Discover how supporting dads strengthens whole families, promotes infant well-being, and creates meaningful early moments that matters. So, welcome, Kieran. There you are.
Thanks, Inga. Morning, everybody. It's great to be here with Brazelton again. I love doing talks with you guys. It's always so interesting. It was great listening to Nick then. A lot of the things resonating across the pond for both of us, I think. I'm just going to share my screen, so give me 2 seconds while I do that, and then we'll crack on. Okay, hopefully you can see that. And I've got presenter mode. That's really good, so I can read my notes too, which is always a bonus. So we're going to talk today about Dad Matters. I'm going to tell you about the project, where it came from, how we work, how we engage with dads, and how we support dads. And I'm also going to talk a bit about how the ENBO and really supports the kind of the structure, the language that we use, all those kinds of things. Dad Matters is powered by Homestart. Homestart is a national family support charity in the UK, and they also have home starts in lots of other parts of the world as well. Dad Matters is an initiative born through Homestart, and we're really focused on the first 1,001 days for babies. We're a baby service that supports dads, so I will talk about babies and dads interchangeably quite often through the presentation. And I'll hopefully be able to clarify anything that anybody needs clarifying. Please pop questions in the chat, and we'll discuss them later on. So there's a problem that we needed to solve as Dad Matters. And the problem we're solving is that fathers are essential, yet they're often invisible. So fathers are really important for attachment and bonding. Obviously, their babies need that relationship. They need that caring, nurturing relationship with dads and with families and with other people. They're really important for maternal mental health and well-being, and outcomes for mums are better when dads are engaged, when dads are well, when dads are supported, and when dads are present. And they're also important for child development over a longer term as well, in terms of toddler age and teenage ages. Dads have a real presence in things like mental health, resilience, social cues, and lots of other things. But unfortunately, they are under-engaged, which is what most people focus on. They're under-identified and under-supported. And we're going to talk a little bit about how we deal with those things in Dad Matters. The difficulty is that dads are not they're not under-engaged or under-identified because they don't want to be within the system or they don't need support. But it's because systems aren't built to reach in to find dads where they are. Most systems, most organizations, and most services and support services wait for dads to be ready to reach out for support. You'll see campaigns to get men to talk more, be more emotionally available. And while that's important, it isn't encouraging dads to come forward. It's really just making dads feel more isolated. What we need to do is reach dads where they are. So the journey for Dad Matters started in 2017 in Greater Manchester, working with the Tameside Early Attachment Service and the Anna Freud Centre. We created a pilot that will support dads with antenatal and perinatal mental health, attachment and bonding, relationships with babies, and also accessing services. Over the first year, we did a lot of consultation. We spoke to around 200 dads about what they wanted from a service. What we learned was that you can't ask dads what they want because they often don't really know what's possible. Most dads would say a dad's group is a great way to go, and dad's groups work for a lot of dads in the UK. But actually, for dads who have things like postnatal depression, post-traumatic stress disorder through traumatic birth, dads who've got a partner on a mother and baby unit, dads who maybe have autism or are neurodiverse, the dads who are very young, these dads don't go to those groups for support. They may attend groups to maintain their wellness or for other social factors. In fact, the two main reasons dads go to a stay and play group, for instance, is to spend time with their baby and to give their partner a break. Now, if we use those two examples, neither of those will really support that dad to understand why they feel the way they do, how they're supporting their mental health when they're struggling, how they're supporting their partner. So we really need to reach into those dads in spaces where they are already present. We also learned that the language we use is really important, and since then, the Fatherhood Institute in the UK have some really robust research around the language that we use. Using the word dad is really important. Dads tend to defer if we use terms like parents or partners. So we want to make sure we use the word dad as often as possible. And if we're using parental terms, we want to make sure it's parental and not supportive. So we wouldn't say mum and partner, because partner means that dads are only there to support mums. Actually, we want to say mum and dad, or we want to say parents of, so that we're using parental terms, because actually parental terms are motivational for dads. When dads are a parent, they're really keen to get involved in it. When they're a partner, they want to be involved, but it looks very different. It's very much a supportive role and not a hands-on primary role. So since 2017, Dad Matters has grown quite naturally, but quite rapidly across the Home Start network. We now have around 28 home starts, and I'll tell you some of the stats around that in a minute. We've transitioned to Home Start UK as a national service, and we represent Home Start and Dad Matters in things like APPGs on babies, family hubs, fatherhood, and a few other places as well. We have a lot of data, which I'm going to share some of it with you in a minute, because we're collecting data from across the network all the time. So we want to think about why that matters. So some of the underpinning evidence, and some of this is quite new, and some of it has been over the last 10 years. 8 to 10% of fathers experience postnatal depression. 5 to 15% experience clinically significant anxiety. And actually, dads probably report anxiety more often than depression, except they're not screened for anxiety as often as they would be for depression. So we want to make sure that we're screening for both things if we are in that position. 10% of non-birthing parents meet clinical thresholds for child-related PTSD, childbirth-related, sorry. 2 to 3 babies lose their dads to suicide each week in the UK. That's a new study that came out a few months ago from Swansea. It was data from a Welsh cohort that was extrapolated for the UK. That's 7 times more than mums in the same period. And it's quite a stark number, 2 to 3 babies per week. 49% of dads describe the birth as potentially traumatic. Paternal symptoms often peak between 3 and 6 months post-birth, which is unfortunate, because actually that's when dads tend to not see services as often. In fact, families tend to see less services between 3 to 6 months, and so there's less opportunity to ask dads if they're okay at the point when they probably know that they're not. So, as I said before, we recently got some funding from the 1001 Critical Days Foundation to transition Dad Matters over to Home Start UK to become a national project. We also have some onward funding that we're providing to our network to create another 10 Dad Matters on top of the 28 that we already have. And we're creating a toolkit and centralised resources for Home Starts to be able to go out and deliver a Dad Matters. It also includes really robust evaluation. So over the last 9 years, we've been collecting data all the time. We've had an aggregated impact report, which I'll share the link to later. That has lots of information about Dad Matters work, the data around outcomes measures. It's got qualitative stuff in there like case studies. It's a really great resource you can find on our website. I know we had a question earlier on about a trans dad, and this is actually a trans dad that we work with in Manchester called Alex, who is the birthing parent. And he's an amazing dad. He comes along to walk and talks. He was supported by our cultural liaison. No, he's not called a cultural liaison. But we have a specific role in Greater Manchester working with trans and LGBT dads, dads who are under 25, dads from ethnic minorities, and dads who are neurodiverse. And Alex really is really kind to let us use these pictures, and obviously a really warm picture there for us to look at. So Dad Matters works in a specific way. We're not a dad's group. There's a lot of dad's groups out there that do an amazing job. We're not trying to replicate that or compete with that in any way. we want to be a supportive service for dads to reach out to support them with mental health, their relationship with their baby, and accessing services. As you can see on the left-hand side, there are priority outcome areas. We know we can have really good impact on those three things through working in three core delivery activities. The first one is universal outreach. We don't wait for dads to come to us. We don't put on a group. We don't have a stall and say, come to us if you're struggling. We go to them where they're at. We know that 99% of dads attend the birth, 97% of dads attend antenatal appointments, and a higher number have attended at least one scan appointment. So we know that the dads are there, yet they are often not spoken to or not engaged with. And so we take the opportunity to be in those spaces to speak to dads. Again, we don't stand in those spaces with a stall and wait for the dads to come over, because they don't. We go over to the dads as they're sat waiting, and we speak to them in front of their partners, with their partners, and we talk about three things. The first one is we're going to ask them how they are. We're going to be really curious about their answer. We're not going to take their first answer as gospel, and we're going to make sure that they understand that we care about what their answer is. Second thing we're going to do is give them some resources. Resources are important because men don't often want a resource that is trying to get them into a service. They don't want a leaflet that says, if you're struggling, come to us. They want something that says, here's how to get to know your baby. Here's how to understand your mental health. Here's the things to look out for. Here's the places that can help. And we use that to signpost as well as to educate dads. And then the third thing we do, and the most important thing for us, is we bring the baby into the conversation. We talk about where they're up to in the pregnancy. We talk about the things that they might be worried about. We give them information about when babies can hear in the womb, about the benefits of skin to skin, about baby states, whatever we feel is right in that conversation. If we've got 5 minutes, it might be quite brief. If we've got longer, it might be longer. But we're really bringing the baby into that room with us as soon as we can, because we know that improves the relationship for the dad in a much earlier way. This universal outreach also includes things like we do walk and talks. As Nick was saying before, men tend to prefer to be on a 45-degree angle than face to face. So we tend to do walk and talks that really help us to talk while we're walking along. We also have new dad workshops, which I'll talk a bit more about later on, where we invite dads in for groups. We do dad chats where we go to antenatal education and speak to dads in those spaces. And we have social media, we have a website that are all based on shared stories, make sure dads understand that they're not alone in the struggles or challenges that they're facing, and signpost to places that can help, whether that's us or other people. You might see us on our social media, we tend to share a lot of stories, we tend to signpost people to things. We don't say, come to us if you're struggling, because dads don't necessarily want to see that on our social media. Excuse me. So professional engagement is the second core delivery activity. This is crucial because we do want to get to the one-to-one peer support in a second, but to do that, we know that many dads will not just reach out of their own account. We know that most dads will struggle until they're in crisis, and if they're in crisis, they may speak to a GP. That might be the only place that they go to. So what we want to make sure is that professionals around the family know how to speak to dads, know what to look out for, know how to ask them how they are, know the resources to give to the dads to support them, and also know, crucially, about our referral mechanisms and what that might look like and how that will support them. Professionals we work with include perinatal mental health teams, parent-infant mental health teams, midwives, health visitors, early help, social care, and other third sector organisations. We can do a number of different engagements with professionals. The first one would be a 2.5-hour training sort of training session. But we also have lots of different versions of that. So we can do a 30-minute lunch and learn. We can do a 15-minute presentation in a team meeting. We also try and engage with them in universal outreach when we go to maternity centres or post and labour wards or postnatal clinics. We'll try and engage with the professionals there as well. Our coordinators will ask a professional when they meet them, which dads are you thinking about now that might need support, and what would you like me to do with them? And then we'll talk through what that might be. And that really encourages those referrals. And that leads us into the one-to-one peer support, where dads get one-to-one support with one of our paid members of staff, our Dad Matters coordinators. That support is open-ended. There's no time limit on it usually. They tend to be between 6 and 10 weeks. Some of them might be 2 weeks where dad comes in, has the opportunity to offload the things that are happening, and then is able to be signposted to the right support. But sometimes there might be 9 months or 12 months where dad might have experienced a loss, is going through a rainbow clinic to have another baby, and there's a lot of touch points for that dad within that year where we'll keep the referral open. We might not engage with them as often, but we can keep it open as long as we need to. Our one-to-one peer support is led by the dad. So we use goal-based outcomes to ask the dads, what do you want to get out of this referral? How can we support you with that? We try and encourage one of those goals to be baby related. We want them to talk about what the baby might get from the dad engaging with our support. And we're going to measure that each week to see the kind of improvements in there towards their goals. We also use different outcomes measures for well-being and for parent-infant mental health, which I'll talk about in a second. And we want to make sure that when dads come into the referral, they're clear about what it is that we're going to do and what we might not be able to do. Dads don't tend to get that many options for support, and so we tend to get a lot of dads that might not be appropriate for our service. The dads that are referred in, they need to have contact with their child. Their child needs to be between 0 and 2 or pregnant. And we want to make sure that we're as a peer support service that we're matching the kind of the level of need. So if they're a very high child protection level, there might be very limited amount of work that we can do, and we'll be very clear about what that might be and what that might lead to. But we're really good at working with professionals to understand that too. Excuse me. So the outcomes measures that we use vary based on who commissions the service in a local area. But we use Core 10 as a standard wellbeing questionnaire. We use it pre and post. It really helps us with scoring their mental health, their wellness. And it also gives us a starting point for the referral for onward referrals initially to primary care.
Kieran, I think you just muted yourself. No?
Right, am I on? Am I on now? Brill. I'm going to do this. I'm going to sit like this. So our outcomes measures, we use Core 10 as a wellbeing measure, but we can also use PHQ-9 and GAD-7, or we use the WebWEMS, or we can use Edinburgh, and those really help us to have a baseline for the dad and have a post referral score, so we can show impact. But they also give us a starting point for the referral with the dad. Do we need to make onward referrals or make sure that they've got access to other support as well? In terms of mental health, we wouldn't necessarily offer an intervention other than peer support and the opportunity to offload. We'll make sure that dads find the right clinical intervention or specific intervention like Andy's Man Club, Mental, Directions for Men, one of those kinds of men's talking groups. In terms of parent-infant mental health, this is a difficult one because we often see dads without their babies, and that makes using things like the Moore scale quite difficult. We can't assess the relationship between dad and baby at every appointment if dads don't bring babies to most of the appointments that we see them with, particularly when we're working antenatally and there's no baby there yet. So we devised a parent-infant questionnaire with our parent-infant consultant, Pauline Lee in Greater Manchester, which helps us to understand dad's knowledge of what babies need and how they communicate. It's a statement-based one. It's very easy to do, and we can score it with a true, almost true, not true, don't know. And we score it pre and post to assess that kind of impact. We are doing some work with the foundation that are funding us to think about what other measures we can look at, or if there's any other measures out there that we can start to support validation of for men that we can use in that space. And then we also collect case studies and family journeys, and you can see some of the case studies on our website under the blog section. So a quick snapshot of the aggregated data that I mentioned earlier on. Over the last 8.5 years, we now have 28 locations in the UK. Our followers on social media are there. We've engaged or trained professionals, 15,314 across 8 years. That's a lot of professionals, including delivering training for the Institute of Health Visiting, delivering training locally through universities and their students, student health visitors, student midwives, student psychologists. And also including those kind of one-to-ones, consultations, and lunch and learns, team meetings that we engage with as well. Engage within the community. So this is our universal engagement. That's 40,000 dads. And actually that's every one of those 40,000 was a face-to-face engagement with a dad, where we did those three things. We asked them how they are, we gave them resources, and we talked about the baby. That's not an online check. It's not somebody messaging a WhatsApp group. It's us in front of a dad who's having a baby or has a baby, speaking to them. We worked with 2,000 dads supported. We had nearly 2,500 referrals, and around 400 of those were not appropriate for the various reasons that I mentioned earlier on. But we worked with nearly 2,000. Of that, 77% improved their bond with their baby. Actually, they improved the knowledge of what their baby needs and how they communicate. And we need to change the wording on that. And 84% improved their mental health and well-being. So this is this year. So this is from April 25 to the end of December. Already in that 9 months, we've seen over 10,000 dads. 800 of those have been NICU dads. We've seen 1,500 dads in targeted activities, 750 in perinatal mental health activities. We've seen 61 dads in rainbow and bereavement clinics, and we've received 687 one-to-one referrals and closed 130 of those due to non-engagement, and only declined 85, which shows that the work we're doing on the message about what we do and how we do it and what's appropriate is working. And it takes time for that to be embedded into a new Dad Matters service. So I want to get onto the EMBO now. And really early on in the early days of Dad Matters, we were working with the early attachment service and learning a lot from them on anything to do with under threes, anything to do with attachment and bonding. There's lots of things that we could use, but some of them felt a little bit too clinical. So things like VIG, for instance, felt a bit too clinical for us to do in peer support, especially when we had a service there that we could signpost into to do that clinical scoring and support. But when we were introduced to the EMBO, it felt like a really gentle but absolutely clear message for dads. And the dads that we did the EMBO with initially were really engaged with the language that it used, the activities that it presented, and we really wanted to make sure that we captured what the EMBO was offering within the work that we're doing at Dad Matters. So it forms part of our initial core training. We recommend that every Dad Matters coordinator will go on the EMBO training. And I think up to now, we're about 90% of our coordinators have done the EMBO. They don't all become certificated. I think we've probably got about 15 or 20% certificated at the end. But that tends to be because we don't tend to see dads with babies, and it's difficult to do the 5 kind of observations. But what it does do is it embeds the language of the EMBO into the work we do with dads one-to-one. So we talk about baby states, crying, consoling. We also link that in with icon messaging. We talk about sleep. We talk about habituation. And all of that language is built into the conversations that we have with dads one-to-one. It also forms part of the offer to maternity and health visiting teams, which for us, when we're trying to engage with those professionals and we're trying to offer them something that helps them in their role, having something like the EMBO in our pocket is a really great way to introduce and improve those relationships. When a specialist health visitor or an enhanced midwife knows that we can do an EMBO with a family, it just makes that transition into kind of referrals much easier. As I've already mentioned, it does form a lot of the language around our one-to-one support. We can do it with dads one-to-one. We can do it with mums as well, which helps us to engage with the whole family. But it also helps us to see the baby. We want to have eyes on the baby as often as we can. Often dads don't want to come with their babies to our appointments, to our walks, to our community engagements. So actually, being able to offer the EMBO is a very specific baby-focused activity that we can offer to dads. As I've already mentioned, it frames the language that we use in pretty much everything that we do. And then finally, it's helped us develop our new dad workshops and our dad chats. So a dad chat is a 30-minute window where we take dads in an antenatal class with midwives usually. We take them out for 30 minutes and we talk about attachment and bonding, mental health and access to services. The main things that we want to talk about are the benefits of skin to skin, the benefits of serve and return, and also baby states, how to know when to interact with your baby, and how to support them when they're crying. We also talk about icon messaging, and talking about icon is great. Dads understand what it is, but actually using the ENBO examples around crying and consoling and baby states can really highlight to dads what they can do about that, rather than just saying crying's okay and you can walk away. We can say you can walk away, and then when you go back, these are the things that you can try and do. These are the things that you can help to learn about your baby and understand what they're saying to you. In those dad chats, we also talk about hormonal changes in men, differences in testosterone levels, in vasopressin, in prolactin, that can really change how they feel about themselves, how they feel about what's happening, how they react and interact and behave in certain situations. That can explain a lot of the differences that dads are feeling and thinking that maybe that's not normal. And that can lead us into speaking about mental health and support. So a dad chat's 30 minutes is a real whistle stop tour, and because it was so popular, we extended it into a new dad workshop. We deliver these just for dads. It isn't an antenatal class. We don't talk about pain relief. We don't talk about labour and birth in a clinical setting. We don't talk about all of the antenatal stuff that they should get with their partner from whoever delivers their antenatal classes together. What we do talk about is, again, attachment and bonding for men, mental health for dads and supporting mums with it, and also accessing services. And we go into a lot more detail there about baby states in particular, and we use the EMBO kind of language around that, which is amazing. So why do we offer the EMBO? Why do we recommend the EMBO training for our staff? Because it's gentle but structured, and it can really slow down the relationship that we have with dads. Men tend to want to come into a service, rush through it, get what they need, and then leave. Being able to use an EMBO means we don't have to do it all in one go. We don't have to offer it and then leave the home straight away. It gives us an opportunity to slow the relationship down and really look at the baby within the setting, and help the parents to see the baby there as well. What we know is that dads tell us they notice more of the baby's cues. They can explain to us how babies communicate, which is amazing. Dads feel more confident, and because they have strengths, they're doing things right, and we're pointing it out to them all the time. And that strength-based approach really helps them to understand and feel much more confident in what they're doing. And for dads particularly, they tell us that babies feel less mysterious when they understand what baby's behavior is. So what we're really looking at is dads feeling seen, included, and competent, even just after one chat with one of our coordinators or a full EMBO. So dads tell us they're more connected, more confident, more equal in the parenting partnership, and less anxious. This is after doing work with Dad Matters, of which it will include the EMBO. And there's a great quote from there from dads. It's great to know that there are different ways I can settle my baby when they're crying. This really helped me to realise that getting to know how she'd like to be comforted was the most important thing. And I think the biggest message we ever have for dads is there's lots of challenges you're going to come across. Getting to know your baby will help you with most of them. And that can really help dads to understand how important that role is. So what did Dad Matt's coordinators say about the EMBO? It helps them to be better able to understand the relationship for the babies. They have more opportunity to educate dads and engage with dads. It increases offer and support for those perinatal professionals that we really need to engage with to provide those referrals. And it improves their confidence in the language and resources that they can use when they're supporting dads. It's great to know that there are different ways I can settle my baby when they're crying. It's the same one from the dads. I've copied the wrong one. That should have been from a coordinator who said that it helped them to feel much more engaged with the dad in the room, and it really built a relationship with the dad that was quite standoffish. But I've copied the wrong one, sorry. So because the EMBO focuses on strengths and not deficits, it fits perfectly with the way Dad Matters works. We want to make sure that when we see dads doing things right, we want to help them to understand that it's right and that they can do more of it. One example of that is I was at a stay and play group session that Homestart were running. One of our dads had attended with his baby who was about 6 weeks old. And Dad was saying to us that he wasn't confident in the relationship with the baby. He had a toddler who was 3, and he felt that the relationship with the baby was not on track in the way that it was with the 3-year-old. He wasn't bonding with them. He wasn't really interested in it. He was telling me all this while he was holding the baby, and as he was holding her, she startled. He put his hand on her tummy and he whispered some words to her mid-sentence with me, and then turned back to me and carried on the conversation. And when I pointed that out to him, he hadn't realised that he'd done it. He didn't know that it was happening. And for the rest of the time that we were there, I saw him deliberately and consciously looking at his baby, touching his baby, interacting with them while he was interacting with other people as well. So just being able to point that out is fabulous. One other example that we have, we were creating some videos, and I went to video one dad, and he had some twins, and I was sat on the sofa talking to the two twins in bouncy chairs who were about 6 weeks old, 7 weeks old. And the dad came down the stairs and popped his head in and said hello. And when he did that, both babies turned their heads towards his voice. They couldn't see him, but they turned around. And he went in the kitchen, grabbed his drink, and then came back in. And as he walked around the front of the twins, he was talking to me. And they followed him across the room until he sat down. And then during the interview, I asked him when his relationship starts with his babies. And he said, it'll probably be in a few weeks' time when their eyes are a bit clearer and they can see me better. And when I pointed out what they'd done, he realised that relationship had started. They knew who he was. They knew his voice. They were already interacting with him a lot. So it really helped him to build on that as well. So I have a video. This is one of our case study videos about Mike. Mike is our health inequalities coordinator in Greater Manchester, which was the word I was trying to think of before. Mike works with a specific cohort of dads. Mike was a service user and then a volunteer before that. After that, this does talk about suicide, so please look after yourselves. If you need to take a minute, please do, and please do whatever you need to do later on to be okay. There is resolution. Mike is well, and his baby as well. Before we watch the video.
It's hard to imagine a time before Atlas, my son, was born. It feels like he's always been here. Before Atlas arrived, most of my life revolved around snooker. I play every night after work and at weekends too. Then the COVID pandemic hit and suddenly I was at home all the time. On the 2nd of April, I found out I was going to be a dad. I have autism and usually don't have much of a filter, but in that moment, I literally had no words. Because of the restrictions, I couldn't go to any scans. But every time my partner Maz went, she would come back and tell me about her appointment. One time, she spoke to someone at the hospital who told her about Dad Matters, and she passed it on to me. I thought I'd be fine. I'm a youth worker. I work with children all the time. How hard could it be becoming a father? Then the 28th of November came, and my whole world changed. Atlas was here. I remember getting the call at 5 a.m. I couldn't wait to meet my little buddy, my little man, my little legend. We celebrated with a state dinner the day he came home, but something wasn't quite right. Atlas wasn't okay. We rang 111, and while on the phone to the operator, he told me I had to do CPR. He apologised as he said it to me. My world fell apart, but somehow I was able to do it and save my son's life. After that, I knew I needed help. I reached out to Dad.
Oh, sorry.
Matters through their website. The very next day, Kieran from Homestart Horse replied, told me I'd be supported and introduced me to my coordinator, Dan. Atlas was admitted to hospital a week later. That's when Dan first called me. He stuck with me from that moment, week after week, checking in on me, checking on my mental health and helping me make sense of everything. I was later diagnosed with PTSD. Just before Christmas, I hit my lowest point. I was ready to give up. I even decided not to leave a note. But as I went to leave, Atlas woke up and I needed to comfort him. That tiny moment saved my life. Without Atlas waking, without Dan Matters and Homestart, I don't think I'd be here today.
I just want to take a second for us to check in with ourselves and make sure we're all right. It is difficult to hear. Mike is a fantastic coordinator. He's supported dozens and dozens of dads in dads with autism, dads from ethnic minorities, and dads from trans and gay backgrounds. So he's amazing. So really want to think about that and make sure you're okay. So my final message is we often say dads need to be more able to reach out. Dads need to feel confident to reach out. They need to be in touch with their emotions. They need to feel their emotions to be able to reach out. All of that is making them reach out, and it's not working. It hasn't worked for 20 years. We need to reach in. We need to go to the spaces where they are. We need to talk to them because they're dads, not because they want to play football or they want to do sports or they want to do messy play. We know how to engage with dads in a way that feels successful, but it isn't supporting dads that need it. And we need to make sure we're diversifying what we offer. We're not just offering somewhere to come and play with your children. We're offering somewhere that they can be asked how they are, they can be given resources, they can be educated, and they can be engaged with in a way that's meaningful for them and their babies in particular. For every baby, their dad matters. These are all pictures that we've had recently. So Ben, bottom right, with the baby with splashing the water, is one of our dads who experienced numerous miscarriages before he had Etta, who's his little daughter there. Tom, top right, is one of our coordinators in Holton, and that's his little boy, who is now a very robust 4-year-old, I think, and on the NICU. And then Tom, top in the middle there, speaking to one of our dads on outreach at Warrington Hospital. Top left is a dad's face. I'm surprised we captured this face looking at the scan. The surprise and the kind of the reality of it hitting that dad there is just amazing. And then bottom left is Job, and he had a partner on a mother and baby unit during COVID. We supported him with bonding with the baby, even though the baby was with mum and he wasn't seeing them face to face. And that's everything from me. I'll stop sharing and we can have questions.
Thank you so much again, Kieran. Another very powerful, insightful, informative presentation. There's a few people in the chat who said that they felt quite emotional. There has been tears, and I've certainly had some goosebumps. But for
Covered school uniform and changing to CCF uniform. He's saying don't wear CCF uniform.
there is somebody. Can I just ask to mute if there's somebody who's talking? Sarah, can you help out?
He's probably
Can you see? Are you able to kind of mute? Okay, thank you. So there are a few questions in the chat. One of them is about, there's a couple actually, about whether you visit and see fathers, dads in neonatal units, but I believe you do.
Yeah, we do. We've seen 60 this year already. No, we've seen 800 this year already in neonatal units. Most of our permissions in hospitals include neonatal units, so we'll use antenatal, post-labor, neonatal units, and pediatrics sometimes in some areas, depending on if they're all co-located. Yeah, we don't just speak to the dads there. We speak to whoever's there, and we signpost them to whatever services we can signpost them to. It's a great way to speak to dads, yeah.
That's wonderful, thank you. Another question in the chat is, are all Dad Matters practitioners male?
No, they're not actually. The Fatherhood Institute has some research around interventions and how practitioners developing interventions for men don't have to be male to make them work. It's as successful if it's a female or a male. Where there's less research and where we've been able to build a service is the engagement of men into the intervention in the first place. That's the difficult bit. And actually, it doesn't need to be. I don't need to be a man to tell a man to come to me for support. What I need to have is a male-facing presence. So our resources, our logo, our imaging, our language is all built by men for men to work with men. If it's a female that's going to those men and saying, this is for you, I work for Dad Matters, I'm supporting you, then men will engage with them. It's all about the interaction. It's all about the professional kind of curiosity. It's all about the communication that we use and the resources that we have to back that up.
Thank you. There's also a couple of questions about some of the parent-infant questionnaires that you use. Are there any references for that? Able to share? There's a lot of interest in it.
It's not something that we would share because it's not a validated tool. We use it just as an outcomes measure, and we created it because the ones that are out there just weren't relevant or appropriate for us to use. So it's not really something that we would share. Unless you have a commissioned dad matter service in your area, you can talk to them about that and they might share that with you then. But yeah, because it's not validated, we don't want to share that on other people to be using it and us not to be able to have sight of the kind of the data that comes from it. But it's very simple. It's things like statements like, my baby can focus on my face from several feet away. My baby knows the sound of my voice from 35 weeks in the womb, things like that. And the answers are definitely true, partly true, not true, or don't know. And we can score it. Each answer has a different score that's weighted, and we can score it pre and post.
Okay, thank you. There are a few questions about where Homestart is, and there is a link in the chat. So please do have a look at that, and you can see where all the Homestart Dad Matters are around the UK. And I believe it's only in the UK. Dad Matters. Is
At
it
the moment, yeah, we're England and Wales. We have 28 Dad Matters on the Dad Matters website, which is dadmatters.org.uk. There's a map that shows you all the local areas and contact details. On the Homestart website, which is Homestart home-start.org.uk, there's a map of all the home starts, and there's 175 of those. And they are able in the next few months to be able to take the Dad Matters program and deliver it in their areas with funding. So if you're interested in that, you can speak to your local home start about that, or contact me and I can put you in touch.
Great. Thank you very much. We have Tony. You got a question for Kieran?
I have, and in fact, Kieran's probably just sort of answered my question in part. Kieran, I work for Hampshire and the Isle of Wight Healthcare NHS Foundation Trust. Unfortunately, the part that I work for covers Hampshire. It doesn't cover Portsmouth and Southampton, and I know Portsmouth already have Dad's Matter in their area. I really am keen to look into this further for the Hampshire families that I work with, and I was hoping that either yourself or somebody in Hampshire could get in contact with me, if that's possible, please.
There is a home start in Hampshire that I have spoken to about Dad Matters a little while ago. They're probably your best port of call to talk to them, tell them you've heard about Dad Matters through me, and they'll be able to talk to you about it. And yeah, they're the ones that would deliver it locally. I have also spoken to Home Start on the Isle of Wight, and maybe the family hubs on the Isle of Wight, but that was quite a while ago. That was maybe 2 years ago, 18 months ago, something. So there is knowledge of us, I think, in the area.
So Hampshire is huge.
Yeah. Oh, I know, yeah.
And not all of Hampshire have Home Start at the moment. Are you able to sort of pass me the contact details of the person? Is that possible if I give you my email address in the chat?
It's probably easier for you to look on the Home Start website and find the one nearest to where you'd be based. If there's not a Home Start that covers the whole area either, Home Starts can deliver Dad Matters across a bigger area if they need to. So that's something to think about. But yeah, it would be easier for you to find the contact details through that, because I'd have to go back through my emails to find out who I was speaking to.
Thank you.
I have a feeling there is a link somewhere in the chat regarding Hampshire. Do have a look. So there's one in Portsmouth, I believe.
There is a Portsmouth one, and there's Dad Matters in Portsmouth, yeah. But Hampshire's covered by a few other home starts as well, I think.
Okay.
Somebody's asked about Wales. We at Home Start Cymru have a Dad Matters project that they deliver, and it's done in pockets at the moment based on funding, so it's not countrywide. And also Flintshire have Dad Matters, although it looks like that might have to wrap up due to funding. They're looking at how they can extend that in Flintshire. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions from the audience? There is something about whether there's any evidence around the 45-degree angle, Kieran.
There must be, because I've read it somewhere, but I couldn't put my finger on where I've read that from. But in practice, when you look at the way that, so if you set up a talking circle for men, circles work better because they're not facing each other. If you set it up where they're at tables, then it doesn't work in the same way when men speak. But that doesn't necessarily mean that men don't speak like that. It just means that if you're asking tricky questions, then it's much easier to do it at an angle.
Thank you for that. Nick, you got a question for Kieran?
Yes, just pie in the sky, uh, money's no object. Is there one or two things that, if you had a magic wand, that you wished were to happen?
Yes, so that there would be a specific perinatal mental health peer support service for every baby's dad in the UK in every area without a postcode lottery. Yeah, if we could provide that service, all of the other stuff that happens is great. Play and stay groups are great, baby massage groups, all of that stuff works really well, but it's not specifically supporting perinatal and parent-infant mental health in a way that aligns with the perinatal teams, the parent-infant teams, the health visiting teams. So we need that kind of link between dads and the services around the family so that dads feel part of that. Yeah.
Thank you. Nick, can I ask what yours would be?
Pretty much the same. That really that interconnected networking is really important.
Yeah, and I think everybody in the room would definitely support that wish of having perinatal mental health services for parents, not just for mothers, but for dads as well, and anyone else who has a newborn baby. Yeah, thank you.
I did come across a study that titled "The Shape of Personal Space" that may answer that question, and I put the DOI in the chat.
Thank you so much. That's really helpful. Nina and Claire. Nina, you got a question for Kieran?
Yeah, and thanks, Kieran, for the presentation. It was so useful. And just sort of drawing on that about having a robust parent infant specialist service. In Stoke-on-Trent, we haven't got a specialist 0 to 5 service. And a lot of the work that I'm undertaking is really looking at how we can develop that robust pathway. And ultimately, fathers are missing from that. We know that within that pathway, step pathway of care. And we know the brutality of the commissioning landscape, and we can't, hide from that. So how would you encourage the wider system commissioning landscape to have that, place validity and inclusivity on collecting that data when the KPIs of the Healthy Child Programme, even the updated version from February this year, they just don't align with collecting data on paternal sort of elements?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's really difficult to collect the data when you're not seeing the dads. So what we would encourage is for them to look at the evidence from other places where the data is collected. So the impact report from Dad Matters, for instance, the report from Swansea University around suicide in the perinatal period, those kinds of types of evidence can really help to improve that pitch, if you like. I'd also speak to the Parent Infant Foundation about developing parent infant services. They really support that across the UK. They're really good at it. They've got a lot of evidence-based resources for you to use there. And then think about if you want to include dads in that. Dad Matters is one option, but there's lots of other ways to kind of improve parent-infant support for dads. And yeah, it's really thinking outside the box. Very often we know that we need to do more for dads. People go around the houses trying to find something and then end up doing a stay and play group, and that tends to be the thing that everybody looks at. Stay and play groups are great, and I keep saying it, like I love them. But then they're not perinatal mental health support for dads. They don't attract dads that have PTSD like Mike. They don't attract dads that have got a partner in a mother and baby unit. Those dads are isolated, more isolated, and we need to reach into them. But they are present in the services around the family, and so that's where we need to link into that. So, like Nick was saying, that connectivity of those services, those elements that are speaking to families and seeing babies, there needs to be a dad offer within that. It doesn't necessarily have to be specifically a Dad Matters scheme, but having like dad champions who work within services, that could work. Getting the right training involved, the IHV training for dad champions is really, really good. Can really help people to understand how to include dads in the services that they're already running without too much extra work, and too much extra funding. So yeah, there's things that you can do.
Thank you for that question, Nina, and thank you, Kieran, for the answers. Claire, you got a question? Are you there, Claire?
No, sorry about that. Hiya, Kieran. Thank you so much for that really useful presentation. And I suppose my question's probably on the back of what you've just been saying there. So I work for a perinatal mental health service in the UK, and we're really keen on interacting with our dads, and we're looking at the moment at obviously our service is based on mothers, but we're looking at the moment to set up a carers group. Totally agree with everything you say. You know, I've had chats with other dads providers in the area, and you know, they talk about the 45-degree angle, and they talk about, you know, the activities to get them involved, reaching in and going into the hospital settings and things like that, which, you know, is brilliant. However, we're in a bit more of a niche area, I suppose, in that we don't have a sort of base as such, like they're not coming for the scans with us and things like that. So my sort of question is around the engagement, and if you have any kind of advice around how do we get the dads into this carers group, because we're really keen on supporting them, but we just don't have that space to go in and reach into them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. So in Greater Manchester, the reason we were commissioned beyond Tameside initially was because the perinatal mental health team within that pathway commissioned Dad Matters as part of their partners offer, if you like. So we take the dads, we do the screening, we then offer them peer support, we signpost into places. But we do that on a one-to-one basis. We don't offer groups for them to come to, because when we've tried that, other than on the mother and baby unit where they're visiting their partner, dads just don't attend those types of groups, because if you think that they're busy supporting their partner or parenting or working, and they don't necessarily feel that their needs are important enough for them to go to a group to kind of get support. So really the way that we would do that is by engaging with dads through referral. So a perinatal mental health nurse or whoever it is that's supporting mum would speak to dad, could do the screening or even use the Hooley questions, refer dads into Dad Matters as a service, get one-to-one support that way. And then what we would do is, as we step them out of that one-to-one support, we have things like walk and talks, stay in plays, and things that are a bit more general that we can signpost them into. But on the mother and baby unit, for example, we would do a drop in. I think we do it once a fortnight in Manchester, where we attend at six o'clock at night for about an hour and a half. Dads turn up, they grab the babies, they come into the family room, we have a brew, we have a chat, we talk about the babies, we interact with each other. That's a really nice space. Dads feel that it's a great place to be because they're helping mum to have some time to do whatever she wants to do. They're spending time with the baby, and they're also accessing us for support. And most of those dads would become a one-to-one support as well, where we would have phone calls with them in between those sessions too. While it probably doesn't help you to understand how to set up a group, hopefully it'll help you to understand that actually not all dads are going to want to come, and it's okay for it to be 1, 2, 3 dads in a group. Getting a lot of dads in there is probably not going to happen.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kieran. And I think we are pretty much getting on to 11 o'clock. I'd like to thank you both, Nick and Kieran, for some really powerful, insightful presentations. Thank you for sharing your insights and your thoughts and experience of working and supporting that really early father-baby relationship. It's been really amazing and great to hear. It certainly left me with a lot of thoughts, and I feel like I've learned a lot also in these last just 2 hours. So thank you so much. Thank you to all of you for attending today, for having this shared interest in how we can support dads better. And certainly I know I've learned a lot from both Kieran and Nick, and it's something that we can definitely think about and use when we are delivering courses at the Brazelton Centre UK. If you're interested in the NBO, the Neonatal Behavioural Observations, if you don't know about it, do contact us at the Brazelton Centre. We're more than happy to share that with you. You can visit our website. We're on social media, where you can also sign up for information. Our next webinar is on the 23rd of June. So pop it in your diaries. If you haven't already, it might be a little bit later in the day because, again, our speakers are from US, from Boston. I think they're both from Boston. It's Emily Lyman and Jane Singer. And they're going to be talking about practitioner more and practitioner self-care and self-awareness when working with infants and their families. Something that we do actually very often miss out on. That is about the impact on all of you when you are working with parents and babies. So hopefully, hope you can join us for the next one. All our other webinars are present and available from our YouTube channel. And this is also recorded and it will be available in a few days. For all of you, you'll be sent a link so you have access to it. Do share it with friends, colleagues who you think might be interested in hearing the talks. And also it's just accessible from the YouTube channel as well. So thank you again. Thank you all for listening. I hope you all have a lovely day and that you are able to take something away here as well and able to think about your own practice with dads. Thank you.